Thank you very much for listening to this week's share on the Sedra of Vayigash. And Vayigash is the 11th of the 12 Sedras in the book of Bereshis, as we are coming towards the end of the epic book, the first book of the 5 books of Moses, of the Torah. And we dedicate our learning for the safe and speedy release of Ran Gvili, the last hostage in Gaza, and for the safe and speedy recovery of all of the people who've been injured in the terrible terrorist attack in Sydney, Australia, and the safety and success of all of the soldiers in the IDF as they continue their missions, their dangerous missions to protect the people and the land of Israel. And as we look at the events in this week's Sedra, we can see how the phrase in the Talmud, this is Brachot 34b, Rabbi Abahu says, Makom shebale teshuva omdim, the place where bale teshuva omdim, these are people who are sincerely returning to Hashem, tzadikim gemurim einom omdim, completely righteous people do not stand in that same place. And we can understand this, that they completely righteous people do not reach the highest level that the Baalei Teshuvah reach. And really, if we wanted to try to think of a person who could take that title of Tzaddik Gomor, a completely righteous person, surely Yosef HaTzaddik, called Yosef HaTzaddik not by the words of the Torah, but in the interpretations that the rabbis give, and the way we refer to Yosef is often Yosef HaTzaddik. Look at the events of Yosef's life. We can see how he really deserves that title from the time that he is sold into slavery and he makes the Kiddush Hashem in the house of Potiphar. He sanctifies God's name. He attributes God's to all of his success comes from God. He mentions God in his conversations, and then this continues when he goes to prison and he helps the butler and the baker by interpreting their dreams. And then when he comes out of prison and he's brought before Paro and he is made Mishneh LaMelech, really just a technicality. Paro is greater than him. He catapults to the highest position and he continues to bring God into the conversation, attribute all of his talents and successes to God. And even more so, when we look in this week's Sedra, how he tries to put his brothers at ease when he reveals himself to them. And they are absolutely in shock. And all of the guilt and trauma of what they have done is now washing over them like a tsunami. And if we look at the words of the Torah and the words of Rashi, and I'm referring here to chapter 45, verse 5, Va'ata, and now, al te'otzvu, do not be sad, va'al yechar ba'inechem, and don't let it, and don't reproach yourselves, ki machartem osihena, because you actually sold me here, ki lemichya shalachani Elohim lifnechem, because it was a supporter of life that God sent me ahead of you. And then he continues again in verse 8, 3 verses later, Va'ata, and now, lo atem shalachtem osihena, you didn't send me here, ki ha'Elohim, but God, vayisimeni la'ov leFaro, and he set me as a father to Pharaoh, ula'adon l'chol beso, master of his entire household, u'moshel b'chol Eretz Mitzrayim, and a ruler in all of the land of Egypt. And then, just a few verses later, in verse 12, we see Rashi on verse 12, which goes, V'hinei einechem ra'os ve'einei ochi Benjamin, and behold your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin, ki fi hamedaber alechem, my mouth it is that is speaking to you. And Rashi says, Ve'einei ochi Benjamin, the eyes of my brother Benjamin, Hashveh es kulam yachad, he considered all of them together equal. Loma, as if to say, Kashem she'ein li sina al Binyamin achi, just as I have no hatred towards my brother Benjamin, sheharei lo haya b'mechirasi, because he was not present at my sale, kach ein belibi sina alechem, so there is no hatred in my heart towards you. And really, how much more can he say? How much more can he do to help his brothers put down that terrible burden of guilt that they have on their shoulders? And ultimately, all of his words, all of his actions will just be the open door into the room. But it is the brothers who need to, once they get into the room, actually remove that burden, see that everything was part of the divine plan. And in this as well, we see it yet another manifestation of Yosef Hatzadik's worldview, that everything is part of the divine plan, and the trauma that he went through, he is able to forgive them because he sees that this was something that Hashem orchestrated for the good that human beings are not always capable of comprehending. And so, if we understand, look back at this phrase in the Talmud, that this a Baalei Teshuvah is in an even higher place. And I think that the Baalei Teshuvah in question is Yehuda, and he is the first Baal Teshuvah in the Torah. And the word Baal, when we say Baal Teshuvah, Baal is translated as owner. And for somebody to own Teshuvah, they have to be so completely connected to the process of Teshuvah, to have gone through all of the stages, which, according to the Rambam, Maimonides, consists of 3 stages. You have to stop doing the sin, you have to regret that you've done the sin, and then when you're placed in the same position, you do not repeat the sin. And really, Yehuda at this point has actually fulfilled all of these conditions. And if we look at the words at the beginning of the Sedra, and we see how Yehuda is so focused and clear, and his teshuvah is so complete. And then if we just actually look at these words, and that starts from verse 31. V'haya kir'osa ki ein hanar. This is Yehuda saying to Yosef that if Benjamin is not with them, it will be that if my father sees that Benjamin has not come back with them, Vomes v'huridu avodecha es sevas avdecha avinu b'yogon sha'ola, and your servants will have brought down the old age of our father in sorrow to the grave. Ki avtacha arav eshanar me'imavi, because your servant took responsibility for the youth from my father, Lamar, saying, Im lo avieno elecha, if I do not bring him to you, v'chotasi la'avi kol hayomim, I will have sinned against my father forever, for all time. Va'ata, Yeshev na avdacha tachas hana, please let your servant remain in place of the youth, Eved la'adoni, as a servant to my master, v'hana ya'al im echov, and the youth will go up with his brothers. Ki eich ele el ovi, how can I go up to my father, v'hanar eineno iti, and if the youth is not with me, pen ere v'ra asher yimtza es ovi, lest I see the evil that will befall my father. And this is the point at which Yosef breaks and he then reveals himself. And if we actually look at the panorama of Jewish history and of the brothers, if we look at Yosef Hatzadik in terms of his contribution to the life of the nation after the events in these 4 Sedras, in Bereshis, we see that Yosef's contribution is not on the national level. We continue to be inspired by Yosef. We look up to him as Yosef Hatzadik. But in terms of the fabric of our nation, it is Yehuda who carries the banner forward. And Yehuda, he is the 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 scion of the ancestor of the Davidic dynasty. The kingship of the people of Israel continues through Yehuda, and Yehuda, in that regard, is the one who is at the central figure of Jewish identity. And so I think that we can really find an application of this principle, that the level of Yehuda is higher, and that is reflected in the influence that Yehuda has on our national life. And this is something, as we reflect it, we remember the beginning of the year, Rosh Hashanah, the Aseret Yemei Teshuvah. Perhaps they're a distant view in the rear mirror, as something quite, it feels very long ago. But the concept of teshuvah, the concept of being able to make amends when we, as all human beings, when we get things wrong, and with the exception that proves the rule is that we can with a sincere teshuvah, we can mend, we can actually get higher than we were, and the sin can even be transformed in certain circumstances to a mitzvah. Such is the huge power of teshuvah. And I think that as we look at this very inspiring and moving episode in the history of our people, and we take the lessons from Yosef Hatzadik, but we take encouragement from Yehuda's words, Yehuda's ability to change himself from being one of the brothers who was callously very capable of selling his brother into slavery, and not really wanting to protect his life, but not really caring, just thinking, oh, why should we get our hands dirty with his blood, and sounding so harsh and cruel in that, and how he is able to make a complete teshuvah. And this is something that it is within our grasp as we look at these heroes, and we are able to take their message and their lesson forward. Thank you very much for listening, and wishing everybody Shabbat Shalom.